You asked for it, and it's here. My AFL Fantasy side, the before opening round edition. Yes, we only have 2 games and 4 teams to watch this weekend. Is something going to change? Of course it's going to change. We know that from last year's opening round. So much changes. But regardless, about a week out now from the start of the 2025 AFL Fantasy season, I wanted to let you see what my AFL Fantasy side looks like right now. As a reference point, we'll go line by line. I'll explain why I've picked every player. And I just got the 2 guys that are priced at $1 million plus and a further 2 more over the $900,000 price point. So am I hunting for value in every position? I think with the exception of maybe one, and even that, I think there's a bit of value potentially there. I'm doing exactly that. Who's at D1 for me? Jaden Short. Yeah, I'm going a little wilder than I know what some others are in the community. They're wanting an anchor of that $900,000 price point kind of guy. So it's the Holmes, it's the Sicily, it's the Clark, it's the Wanganeen Miller, it's the Sinclair, the Sheasel, the, Whitfield, Zorka. So many guys you could pick. Why have I got such a lowly priced guy sitting in there? Well, for a couple of reasons. One, history would say, with the exception of last year, Short's a 90s plus defender. And I've seen through the community series exactly what I'd heard and expected to happen, which is Richmond having a lot of ball in the back half and Short being their most adventurous ball movement outcome from this defensive line. So to me, those 2 worlds combined, I'm just really comfortable with Short. I know a lot of people, based on the ownership percentage, have him at D2 or 3. But why is he at D1 for me? I just don't love any of the other options. And rather than forcing something that I'm not a fan of, whether it be paying up at the peak price point or the perceived peak price point of guys like Zorko, Whitfield, and Sheasel, I'm like, no, I'll go cheaper. And then the other guys that I had looked and played through there, like a Sinclair, a Sicily, a Holmes, just didn't feel like I liked it. And so rather than forcing a player and just, like a 5-year-old kid being told to take your medicine and like it, I've just decided to take what I want. And so for me, Short at D1 just lets me have the value that I want. And as you see through the rest of this structure, while it's very mid-price madness, I know where my correctional trades may need to be allocated. And it's probably in the back line, like a lot of us, it's likely to be. D2, Matt Roberts. Undeniable value at this price point. Yes, he's got the early buy, and we will wait and see what happens in opening round before fully locking that in. But last year, he showed premium levels of scoring. He repeated that performance and role throughout the preseason. The departure of Errol Goulden, I think, it just removes the potential ceiling limitation he might have had on him, because McInerney can kind of open up a little bit more of his scoring. Now there's some more ceiling games that can come with Roberts. I like it. I'm here for it. I'm locking it in. D3, Harry Perryman. He scored all right for us in AFL Fantasy in the Community Series game, but politely, I don't care about the score for 2 reasons. One, they don't count towards what we do in year. And 2, it was against a Richmond side that are going to be very second rate in comparison to what they've done over the last 5 to 10 years from putting up challenging opposition. But what I liked about Perryman is twofold. One, he still found a way to get plenty of ball without really drawing a lot through stoppage. And that's where Perryman is at his best. He's there as the defensive-minded midfielder to play some protection work for the likes of DeGoey when he comes back from injury, and to support a Nick Dacos and a Scott Pendlebury to allow them to be the A1 offensive types. But that's where his scoring base comes from, through tackling, through pressure, through contested work. And that just really wasn't there in that Community Series game against Richmond. And the second is just how clearly defined this midfield role is now. I just love it. Again, an opening round disaster may cause need for change, but that role looks really good. And I'm very, very happy to lock that in. D4, Joel Freeger. I'm a fan of what he's done. I've heard Marcus Bontempelli himself speak about him multiple times, just how good his preseason has been. I like him for a couple of reasons. One, there's some question marks about Bailey Dale being available for round 1. So should that happen, there's a potential acceleration right out of the gate in AFL Fantasy, as he is the playmaker and distributor. We saw that in the Community Series game against the Hawks. The other thing is there's no Jason Johannesson coming anytime soon. And so even with a Bailey Dale coming in, we know Luke Beveridge likes to have two option outlets to come with the ball out of defence. It is run and carry and ball use. It is really improving to the point that it's on the very, very good side now, not just good AFL standard. I think at 627,000, he's right in that price range where if somebody else pops, I can just hit the parachute and jump. If Dale impacts him, I can hit the parachute and jump. But he sits in that nice price range pocket. And I think if we don't get Bailey Dale, we could get a strong start with that outcome. D5, Sam De Koning. I think people are sleeping on how prominent his role was in the Community Series in the ruck. Conway is out injured with no real clarified term of return. They do not like to run Mark Lixarves as the number one ruck unless there's an injury that happens in a game. Therefore, it's down to him and Stanley, and politely, SDK offers a lot to them, not just through the work he does in the ruck, but the utility of how moving him into that back line to structure things up when Blix goes into the ruck and not just push him to the bench, which Stanley had kind of done. Just think opens up a few more options for them. I like what he can offer. I like some of the early fixture. Check out who their opponent is in round one. That, again, we talk about getting off to a hot start. He's absolutely someone that sits in that spot. I like what it's going to be. I do lose the accelerated price movement with no opening round visibility on it. But unless Stanley is named in round one, jogging on with Sam De Koning. And then at D6, this one might be a little bit of a shocker for you, but an Ari Schoenmaker at under $500,000. So no rookies on field for me. I like Schoenmaker for a couple of reasons. Number one, they're really lacking in some height in this back line. They've got Dougal Howard out for a long period of time. Battle has moved clubs over to Hawthorn. And while he hasn't played in any of the televised games in the Community Series or the practice game, it's because he's been unwell. It's not he's been out of favour. To me, I think he adds something, not just structurally with the height that he offers, but offensively, he adds something really damaging with that ball movement. To me, I think at this price range, he offers a lot of potential outcomes for us. And if someone like a Sinclair and Nazai Wanganeen-Miller aren't the 1-2 options in the back line, it seems like one of them's always going to be playing up the ground a little bit more. He might also get some playmaker and the ball movement flooding through him as well, which would only increase his scoring. The reason I've got him there and I've not jumped into a rookie, and the two rookies I've got for sake of reference point, I've got a James Leake. We do get to see what Leake does in opening round and if he's even selected. And the other one I've got is a Zach Reed as my two basement level defenders, really. The reason I've got Schoenmaker and not got a Jackson Pryor, who I think may just have the better scoring ceiling of the three, is I want a parachute option. I want a player to go into that's at that sub 350,000 price point. Because if you're running a Leake, a Reed, and a Pryor, what happens if not only one of those three, what if the De Koning, the Frieger, the other mid-pricer that you're running, there's nothing there to go down to then free up cash to use another fix-up option somewhere else. I know you're like, well, MJ, you might be able to get it through the mid-cash cows. You might be able to drop one of those guys or your forwards. True. But I want the versatility in my squad of a downgrade option available to me that I can at least see as viable, not just the ones that surprised me in round one. I want one there to know that I've got protection should some of these riskier selections, which all our mid-prices are to a degree, actually has some protection. So that's why, for me, I've gone in that spot. I've got the cash sitting there to go prior, but I wanted to use that as an illustration point. And it's why I've gone Schoenmaker. I think if he's named round one, I think there's a world where he could be a really handy scorer for us. Then let's hit into my midfield. I've been pretty bullish on this guy and made a statement about him across a lot of the preseason draft buyers that have bought our draft kit as Patreons. And if you're not a breakout or a premium tier Patreon who get that for free, you can also just buy the draft kit and the draft tier rankings outright. All the details for our Patreon are in the description of this episode. You shouldn't be surprised to see this guy as my M1. I've said he is going to be the number one mid pretty much most of the preseason. Andrew Brayshaw. He is an absolute star. He's a stud. I loved his community series game. I love his fixture. And even the fact there's no Hayden Young, at least for round one, if not a couple, just I think is really, really favourable to him. His work rate is elite. He's not the tag target anymore. And that fixture is juicy as I'm absolutely on an Andrew Brayshaw at M1. M2, Ruckan Connor Rosie. There's a couple of teams, I'll just say it flat out for you now. There's a couple of teams, I think you want a piece of them in your midfield or forward lines that have got, and these are players that are playing through the midfield, that have unbelievable fixtures to start the year. It's Fremantle, it's Port Adelaide, it's Adelaide, and it's Carlton. All four of those teams, when I look at the first 4 to 6 weeks of the year, I look at the matchups and who they're coming up against. Yes, it's using 2024 data to inform the decision. But I look at that and I go, man, if you're a Docker, a Port, a Crow, or a Blue, I want a slice of someone that's going to play through that midfield in my team. And I've done that, as you'll see through the rest of this. And that's why I've got Connor Rosie. To me, he is absolutely the personification of fantasy football. When healthy and when fit, we talked about this around him specifically in the episode of the 50 Most Relevant, that he's actually closer to a 110 midfielder over the past 2 to 3 years since moving into this midfield. And to get him at under $1 million is absolutely value. Very, very comfortable that he's going to push that 110 average this year, regardless of whether Butters plays or not. He's not the tag target, especially with what we've seen the Hornet do this preseason. M3, Clayton Oliver. He will not kick 3 goals every week like he did last weekend in the community series, but his role was good despite, and his performance and energy and effort was absolutely fantastic. Again, it wasn't a high stoppage game, and a guy that does a lot of his work on the inside to be able to score the way he did and build his disposal and marks and tackles. I actually really liked his game. Yes, the centre bounce ratio was a little bit interesting, but again, they're still figuring out how does this work with Ed Langdon in there? How does this work with Trent Rivers in there? I think we will see a higher level of Oliver's split than what we saw in the practice games and the community series, but just lock it in. Just absolutely take every piece of it. Clayton Oliver absolutely walking into 100, barring an injury. Just kind of hitting him in the face this year. M4, Adam Chera. I've had moments through the preseason where I've been super cool and super hot on this selection. I'm deciding I'm going to back it in. There's a number of reasons for both the warm and the cooling approach. The cooling approach, of course, is just that historical narrative of his soft tissue injuries really hurting him. And I would understand any reason for someone going, I don't want to get him because of the injury history. And that's fine. That's a valid enough reason not to start someone. You just can't, when you see them pop good scores, go, oh, get them, they're scoring good. The scoring is not the issue with Chera. It's can you get weeks banked out of him? And if you can, you know he's going to return value at under $750,000, given his historical pedigree is not only seasonal average of 90 plus, but he goes on runs of 110, 115 throughout seasons, and he starts with Richmond. Go back and think about that Collingwood game. Dacos, I know we don't often talk about preseason scores, but just how easily he got the ball. A player like Chera, Richmond's midfield mix just doesn't have an outlet to prevent him from getting anywhere near the ball. And so, to me, this could be an absolute feast to start the year, an absolute vice-captaincy option in round one if you want to live life a little risky and load some variables onto next Thursday night's game. But, we'll see how we go. I'm in. I'm confident. If it goes bad, there's so many options in this sort of $850,000 to $600,000 price range you could choose. If he goes pear-shaped through injury, I'll just jump on to somebody else. Outside of round one, I'm in best 18 for the next month. It should be relatively risk-free outside of that. And if you want to really eliminate the risk, put him on the bench with the emergency if you're not that confident, and then roll through a red dot of someone. Like, there's ways of protecting this so you don't get stuck with an injury score in round one. I don't think it's happening. He's had a flawless preseason. He's done everything asked of him. You've just got to back in what you know. I think he's figured out some of the ways to work his body. He's changed his running style. I mean, it's a lot of love for Adam Chera, but that's okay. M5. James Peatling is who I'm going for at under $650,000, a 50% mid-forward split. It wouldn't shock me to see him pick up forward status at that first allocation. Once all the buys are done and we get through the 6 games for everybody, it wouldn't shock me to see him getting that opportunity and outlet. He is a damaging option forward of the ball in outside territory and space, and certainly if he gets the chance to win the footy or stop someone from winning the footy with a tackle, he showed he can score. In that practice game and community series, we saw not only him about that 50% centre bounce rate, it was really reflective and echoing of what we saw at GWS, which is, I think he's going to hit around that 90 sort of range, maybe high 80s, given in the fact that the Crows have a good fixture, and when he's in that role, he scores, especially someone who scores so much through tackling, and there just wasn't many stoppages in that game. Is there another way to go to a Dylan Shield type or a Will Day type or anything I like through that? Yeah, of course it is. And he's probably the guy that becomes the avenue to move off should one of those guys pop early on. We'll wait and see. Again, we don't get to see Shield in opening round anymore, but we do get to see a Will Day. So we'll wait and see what happens there. I'm still pretty confident he's a good pick this year. M6, going Ollie Hollands. He's got that defensive role. We saw that when he played that role last year, he's a 90 sort of AFL fantasy scorer. He's got a nice start to the year fixture-wise. They're just putting him in that pocket in that spot. I think it's a good option, especially for me, who's running some heavier risk profile in my defensive line, to have someone that sits in that spot that I think could score really well, and then fade him into that back line, and then all of a sudden start to look for the value of some fallen premium midfielders that after they've been peak at their price, scored okay, but right for the picking, I think I might be able to just turn the likes of a Perryman, the likes of a De Koning, the likes of a Frieger, flip Hollands back, them up, happy as day. Nathan O'Driscoll. Nope, no sign of Mini Monk anyway. I feel like every time I mention Noddy in the preseason, he just turns up. Not so much. I love what this guy's going to be for us this year. Getting centre bounces and doing some damaging work on the outside. The fixture is awesome. I'm doubling down on how good I think the Fremantle start to the year is. I'm not too concerned about a scoreless first quarter in the Community Series game against Melbourne. I think he's going to be a fantastic buy for us at under 450k. And the absence of a Hayden Young for at least round 1 should only further boost his scoring. I don't think he's a sub-risk. I think there are others in this side that are. But for me, I'm really comfortable with what he's going to be. I don't think it's going to be a problem at all. And then my other midfielder on field is an Angus Sheldrick. Opening round will determine whether or not I go there with him, and that's not so much in terms of role determination, but how much of a price acceleration is he going to move for me. But at under 450,000, again, another really nice option. Yes, he's not priced the same as O'Driscoll, so I'm probably freaking out some people that go, 7k more? Why is he at 8? I just picked him there. But he's got the role. He's got the scoring capacity. There's no Gould and there's no Mills for at least a month. He's going to get himself an opportunity. And again, he's another one of those guys that sits in this range that I go, oh, well, if the mid-cow pops that I didn't have, I'll just go and get them. And Sheldrick's my pathway out, knowing that, yes, he'll have the early price movement acceleration, but he also has the first buy. I can take my money and run if I need to. So I'm happy with him there. Then my bench options, both have L in their name. One starts with it, one surname starts with it. Got Levi Ashcroft as my emergency at this stage. He's an absolute stud. I think he's going to be an absolute knockout pick for us this year. Of course, we need to temper expectations and not think Sheasel, think Dacos. But I think he could get close to mirroring what his brother was, which was a sort of high 70s, knocking on the door of 80s in his AFL Fantasy debut. I think that's right within his scope. He just scores and moves and knows how to play the game. So he's there. And then I got Xavier Lindsay at the moment. He's going to get that wing role. We saw Caleb Windsor have it last year, and at times that was quite favourable for us for AFL Fantasy. I think Lindsay's a better user of the ball too, and a better decision maker than Windsor. That's no shade on Windsor. It's just elevating how good I think Lindsay can be. So for me, I've got him at M10. I like what this is going to deliver for us. This is where I probably diverge even further away from your team, but it's reinforcing a statement that I made. Here at the coaches panel, when we say something, we're going to back it up. We don't just say a statement and walk away from it. I made a statement in the preseason that if I was going to be spending over $1 million and paying up for any Ruckman, there was only one that I would do that for. And to me, that is Max Gawn. This dude is a knockout pick. I am all on this selection. I think he's going to be a brilliant selection to start the year. Go and check out who they're playing to start the year. That's all I'll say. I was going to quote it to you and then shown a little bit of self-control. Yes, it's expensive, $1.147 million. He is definitely the most expensive player in my team. But the first month is good. The second month is awesome. Oh, some would say he looked a little bit tired, a little bit sore and knocked around. Yeah, he did cop one decent bump in the Community Series game, but to me, Tom Campbell is not a risk factor at all. He is break glass in case of emergency and nothing else. He's still unbelievable. He started the year on fire last year when he was fresh. I think he's going to do the same for us this year. I'm all in on Max Gawn. If you're paying up for any ruck this year, I think Max is the one that's got the best 8 weeks to start the year and has the least amount of uncertainty. Cherry's fine. Marshall's probably too risk profile heavy for me, given we haven't seen him and he's coming back from a different type of injury than others are that didn't play in the Community Series. But to me, I'm backing in my Gawn selection. I'm putting my money where my mouth is. I'm not just saying Gawn's the best and then picking Cherry to protect it. Cherry's fine. I just think his first 6 weeks is a tough ruck matchup. Gawn's first 8 weeks looks really juicy, and I want a piece of it. I think he's a vice-captaincy and captaincy option, obviously, every single week. R2, Tom De Koning, does not need much explanation. No pit net for the first month or so of the season. Just means he's going to get that pop start to the year, let alone the great fixture that rolls with it. Gosh, against Richmond, it could be absolutely gravy matchups for us this year. I'm a piece of that. And then at R3, Archer Reid. I don't like Harry Boyd in that space. I think Reid's more likely to play more consistent games. I think Boyd is there for if Marshall is hurt and not much else. I think Reid sits inside that best lineup. If you want to run a red dot option through there, you absolutely can. That's where, Heath might sit in there or another Eagle Ruck. Anyone else you like could probably go in that spot. But to me, if you're trying to get a little bit of money out of it, I don't mind it. Who knows? Maybe you drop your VC into a player that pops early and you need a red dot in round 1 before the blue dots appear in rounds 2, 3, and 4. That's absolutely fine to consider that. But I'm running for a green dot option, at least at this stage. Then let's turn the corner to my forwards. Isaac Rankin is my F1. I definitely debated whether or not I approached the same ideology that I did in the defensive line, which is I wasn't hugely fan of anything that was in that sort of higher upper end price points. So I just went all value in those lines and guys that I think have significant value to make. Rankin's a little bit different for me. To return value, he's just got to sort of go, 90-95? And given he's 100K almost cheaper than Horn Francis, what he's got to score to deliver the same amount of cash generation and value is cheaper than what it is. So a Horn Francis, I've got him, he needs over that first 6 weeks to go that 105 to be able to deliver. Yeah, that was really worthwhile paying up in and around that price point. Whereas Rankin, I've got him going 10 points cheaper to really be worthwhile picking. And I think the way he plays versus the way Horn Francis plays, the fixtures I think are comparable for a bunch of different things. I just think it's more likely that I get a 90-95 out of Rankin than I do get 100-105 out of Horn Francis every single week. And so I'm backing Rankin in. Some would say it's my Crows bias, and I can't say that it's not a factor for sure. I just think he offers a little bit of better value on the dollar, but would not knock anybody for picking Horn Francis because, gosh, he looks elite. McRae's my F2, just a star in this role from a fantasy perspective. He's going to accumulate plenty of the ball. There's nobody else that's rolling through that midfield. He's going to be an absolute lock. If you're looking to create some separation from the pack, he's not one to do that with. He's my F2. F3, I'm going into Riley Sanders. Again, probably somebody that had Bontempelli not been injured, I might not have been as keen. Yeah, the Trelaw absence helps, but Sanders was the guy I'm like, yeah, the opportunity is going to sit there, but now the midfield's really opened up with arguably two of their best midfield options out. It's now Libba, it's Richards, and I think Sanders sits in that spot, and a guy like a Kennedy comes in as the fourth option that rolls through. He becomes a very easy parachute outlet because other guys that I've got in there might not offer the same much parachute value. But again, you talk about, hang on, MJ, how are you going to fix a defensive line if it goes bad and you want to get your hands on a Sheasel early? Well, Sanders down to a cash cow. Done. all of a sudden, you freed you up. Done. That's the thing with these selections. If you've got to have almost for every different player, if this, then that approach. If this happens, then I could do that. If this happens, then that. Because what will land on Thursday night with that teams of every team dropping, and we already know our Tigers and our Blues, it is panic stations hit and we butcher out our sides. Don't do that. Build contingency plans this week. Okay, if this happens, then I'll do that. If that happens, then I'll do that. That way you're at least protected from the emotional chaos and you've got a backup plan in every single spot. I think Sanders still is going to be great value at under 700,000 with third midfield option. And that's even if Richards is back by round one. Yeah, I like this pick. Bailey Smith, I know some have faded him without any interest after not playing in the community series, but under 600,000 with such high ownership, with such a clear role, and in a team that's going to want to see him succeed, and with his fantasy pedigree. Again, he, McRae, and the next player I'm going to mention, their ownership and their pedigree is so big, but find somewhere else to go unique. I just don't think it's wise to walk away from the gift. Yes, take on the ownership in certain spaces. I'm doing that with the likes of a Tristan Cherry, but you've got to be calculated about and you've got to know what your options are. As good as there are a bounty of options in the forward line, I just don't think Smith is that one for me. F5, Caleb Daniel, enough said. He's got the distribution role. He's got the history at North Melbourne, and North Melbourne have got the history of players scoring well for us, and at just over 500k. You can't ignore the gift. Absolutely lock this one in. Hugo Garcia is my last on-field forward. Under that $430,000 price range, mid-forward, again, gives me options. If I want to move a few things around before I even get to who's sitting in my utility, I can play around with a bunch of different variables. I like what I saw from him. His midfield role looks pretty solid. Yes, there was no Sinclair in the community series, but he was still third in the club behind Steele and behind McRae. And he offers some speed in a midfield that doesn't have a lot. He offers some defensive work rate that outside of Steele they lack a little bit. Just adds a bit of dynamic movement that I think they're lacking as well. So I like Hugo Garcia. Again, if I need to parachute to a cash cow that pops in opening round or round one, go for it. But I like what I got through there. My bench options in the forward line, Sam Davidson is a non-negotiable as far as I'm concerned. It would be a shock if he's not named in round one. He was dominating that wing all preseason, and for many of us, we saw it then firsthand against the Hawks. Lock this one in. He can be on field for you if you wish, but we do have a bounty of options that are now rolling through there. If you want to hear how to make that differential decision that you've got to make of where do I go with this forward, that forward, how do I tier them out, what do I do? Check out our recent preseason strategy episode. It dropped probably the episode before this one, actually. Go back and check it out. We talked about forwards, how you tier them in your classic side, and how you inform those decisions. But Davidson, top tier, I think it's going to be hard to go against him if he's named. And then Connor Stone. He's another one that's on opening round watch. We'll wait and see, A, what the role is, B, if there's a sub-risk, and then C, what he scored. All those variables collide, whether or not he then makes it through the team into round one. We'll have to wait and see how those things all land. But I like what I saw from him. Played forward and back over the last couple of weeks and shown he's got some abilities about him. So I'm happy to go there. Then my utility, spending a little bit of money on the bench. I've got a Finn O'Sullivan. That wing role, not hugely favourable, but North Melbourne are playing a pretty heavy possession ball movement game. And then the thing I want to just really make sure you didn't miss on the weekend was in the last quarter or so, he did move into the halfback spot. And when he moved into that halfback spot, my word, did he look good. Caleb Daniel is fine as an option back there. But Finn O'Sullivan's ability to create is exceptional. It would not shock me as early as round one if Clarko pulls the trigger in the same way he did with Sheasel after letting him have a little bit of an exploratory few quarters in the preseason to go, best for development for Harry is put him at half back and funnel the ball through him. I'm not saying it's happening, but it wouldn't shock me if they make the similar decision with Finn O'Sullivan. I love the pick. I'm in there. Some would be like, why isn't he up there and Lindsay there? Does it really matter if he's not on field and he's not my emergency? I've got Levi Ashcroft as the emergency in the mid. Unfortunately, Finn's not going to land. And as you can see, I got some decent fat on the bone with a lot of these options through here. I haven't gone all the way down outside of in my defense and my forward line. I've still got some fat on my bone on my cash cow options in a lot of different spaces. I know where I can skim the fat and pick some value even further, and I know the options I can parachute in and out of. There it is. That is my AFL Fantasy side before we get to opening round. Is it similar to yours? If you're watching this on YouTube, comment below. Let me know how similar are our sides. Have I gone nuts by fading a Tristan Cherry? Look, maybe I have. What is the big differences between our sides? I'd love to know. If you're listening to this as an audio podcast, please make sure you follow us. You give us a 5-star rating, and you can get in touch with us across social media by jumping in the description of this episode. All the handles and all the platforms are on. You can find it in there. All the details to get your hands on some Coaches Panel merch. It's also inside the description, as are the links to directly become part of our Patreon, get some bonus content, get the draft tiers if you're a breakout and a premium supporter. And there's a few other surprises we've got lined up for you before the start of the year. Hey, thanks so much for tuning in. We hope you've enjoyed this episode. We'll be back again tomorrow with another bit of content to help you through your AFL Fantasy preseason.